The chaos of Confederate forces at Antietam is revealed by James Longstreet's eyewitness account. 23,000 casualties in one day. Not only was the Battle of Antietam the bloodiest daybreak in history, but it was also the point at which the Confederacy's deadly flaws became apparent, and just one man dared to speak the truth. The most trusted commander under Robert E. Lee, James Longstreet, anticipated the catastrophe. Starving soldiers, a rash decision to divide their force, commanders crippled by wounds and pride, and a risky invasion of the North. Although Lee is portrayed in history as a tactical genius, Longstreet's own narrative presents a much more somber picture of arrogance, chaos, and a blood-swimming sunken road. In addition to Union gunfire, the South was doomed by shattered leadership, disregarded warnings, and a desperate general who was forced to load cannons with his bare hands as his world fell apart. The real story of America's bloodiest day begins here, and what Longstreet revealed will rewrite everything you thought you knew. But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. Longstreet stressed that the situation required an immediate military response, with strategic focus shifting toward Potomac crossings. Robert E. Lee and his officers agreed that it was now necessary to launch an offensive campaign in order to spare Virginian territories from further conflict. This is not the sanitized myth of the lost cause. This is Antietam through the eyes of the man who lived it, who fought alongside Lee, watched horses explode mid-command, and spat grim truths, even as his own staff fell around him. When his divisions reached Frederick, Maryland on September 7th, several members of the local community welcomed them with open arms, offering food and verbal encouragement. Lee suggested redeploying troops to capture Harper's Ferry in order to secure the Army's rear flank. Longstreet resisted this tactic, warning that it would be disastrous to split up their forces in the face of immediate Union threats. Longstreet met with Lee and Jackson at headquarters the next day. They were a physically challenged trio. Longstreet was limping in a slipper because his heel was burned. Jackson was tending to wounds from a horseback accident, and Lee's hands were immobilized in splints following an injury. Lee only approved a portion of Longstreet's corps' reinforcements to support Jackson's operation, despite Longstreet's call for coordinated attack against Harper's Ferry. Then, using the mountains as defensive cover, the Army of Northern Virginia moved westward. Longstreet stayed in Boonesboro while Jackson left for Harper's Ferry. This plan was quickly upset by Union movements. On September 11th, Lee sent Longstreet northward after hearing reports of Federal forces moving from Hagerstown. Longstreet became more and more irritated with the Army's dispersion during the march. He pushed Lee, "General, I suggest we unite our position and allow Federal forces to engage us here." The campaign was made worse by harsh weather. Relentless forced marches from Richmond left troops tired, and defection rates soared, reducing effective strength by an estimated 25% as they advanced northward. These difficulties were made worse by the locals' decreased support for the Confederate cause in this Maryland area. Soldiers rummaging for supplies faced verbal abuse, slamming doors, and angry reactions. While stationed in Hagerstown, Longstreet's corps was granted a brief reprieve from September 12th to 13th. When Stuart informed Lee that Union soldiers were moving toward South Mountain through the Catoctin Mountains, this shaky calm broke. As McClellan's army threatened to take advantage of Confederate divisions, Lee and Longstreet had to quickly plan. In order to create reinforced lines and enable coordinated counterattacks against the Union flanks, Longstreet suggested retreating to Sharpsburg. Lee turned down this offer in favor of facing the Federal forces at South Mountain. Confederate units encountered fierce fighting while defending Turner's, Fox's, and Crampton's gaps. Longstreet warned Lee of an imminent collapse in the absence of reinforcements after D.H. Hill's damaged forces at Turner's Gap. Lee approved withdrawal at night. Lee positioned men along the ridges surrounding Antietam Creek as he withdrew to Sharpsburg. Jackson's success at Harper's Ferry coincided with Longstreet's arrival on September 15th. Confederates gathered in anticipation of McClellan's postponed attack until the 17th. The Piper Farmhouse, 500 yards south of the buried road, served as Longstreet's headquarters. Longstreet and Hill were invited to dinner by Henry and Elizabeth Piper, who provided wine. Longstreet objected, thinking that Hill might have been poisoned, but he changed his mind after seeing that Hill was unaffected. Overnight, officers slept in the orchard. After breakfast with the Pipers on September 16th, Longstreet and Lee went over defenses. As expected, McClellan's men rallied, and on the 17th, the Battle of Antietam began. The initial conflicts were focused on Dunkirk Church, Miller's Cornfield, and the nearby woods. Before joining Lee and Hill on horseback at the Sunken Road, Longstreet oversaw actions on the right flank. Longstreet made a joke after observing Hill's vulnerable position. "If you insist on drawing their fire, allow spacing so we avoid their line of sight." Shortly after, Hill's horse's knees were severed by artillery fire. "That shot targeted you," Longstreet said dryly as confusion broke out. Longstreet observed dark humor as Hill labored to get off the flailing horse despite the somber scene. "Hill, this side. The other, number. Climb over its head or slide backward," he said dryly. The injured horse was put down after being released. According to a staff officer, Longstreet remained composed in the face of criticism, with his teeth grinding on cigars as the only sign of anxiety. He coordinated reinforcements while keeping an eye on the bloody battle along the Sunken Road, which was later known as Bloody Lane, from the Piper farm. It was ineffective to send Richard Anderson's division to support Hill. After Anderson was injured, Roger Pryor took over as commander. As the artillery barrage grew more intense, Pryor called for immediate assistance. "Guns en route, General," Longstreet replied. "No retreat, victory, or death." Union soldiers were able to breach lines due to a disorganized Confederate withdrawal. Miller's battery was sent out by Longstreet, but his staff, Sorrell, Gorey, Walton, Fairfax, and Manning, had to manually load and discharge cannons into advancing forces due to crew fatalities. Longstreet ordered canister rounds while mounted amid the confusion, and his makeshift gun crews assisted in putting down the Union advance. In subsequent publications, he redirected post-battle acclaim for his leadership and acknowledged D.H. Hill as the real hero of the day. History would forever proclaim that a Virginian had accomplished Hill's achievement. Hill, however, was from deeper Dixie. The only thing that stopped Burnside's corps from crossing Antietam Creek was A.P. Hill's last-minute reinforcement. The conflict ended with 23,000 casualties, making it the deadliest day in American history. The employees of Longstreet suffered greatly. Sorrell suffered a shell wound, Walton was shot in the shoulder, and Fairfax mourned his dead steed, Saltram. The shot from Saltram. "General. In the back," he exclaimed. "Happy it wasn't your back, Major," Longstreet shot back sardonically. After helping a Sharpsburg family during a shell-induced fire that evening, Longstreet came late with a cigar in hand, raising concerns that he would miss Lee's command meeting. Lee greeted him with relief. "Speak, my old warhorse. We follow your advice." Commanders prepared troops food after strategizing, preparing for the uncertainty of daybreak. In 12 hours, 23,000 lives were lost. Antietam's fields weren't merely covered with blood. The broken illusions of the Confederacy drowned them. James Longstreet witnessed everything. The buried path littered with dead, the broken command, and the disregarded warnings. However, stories of valiant defeat and exemplary Southern heroes overshadowed his truth throughout history. Consider this. What if Lee had followed his legendary advice? Would the South have been spared if it had consolidated at Sharpsburg? Or was Antietam supposed to be the final nail in a cause founded on arrogance? Longstreet's narrative reveals more than just tactical shortcomings. It rips open the decaying heart of the Confederacy.